Burnaby, British Columbia, a long way from home for a young man from suburban Australia. It was an EA Sports community event that revealed indoor courts, outdoor courts, and an exciting development that wasn't mentioned on the invitation. It was there that I learned of a game that was set to explore the soul of hoops in a brand new way. Yeah, NBA Street Homecourt is a little bit like that. My first NBA Live community event, held at the EA Canada studios, was chiefly meant to give a group of what we now call content creators an early look at NBA Live 07. You probably know how that game turned out, so we don't need to dwell on that too much. Still, being my first community event, my first time flying internationally, and a huge opportunity for the NLSC back in the day, it was still a memorable trip. Apart from getting to cover an NBA Live game in production, one of the most exciting parts of that event was getting a sneak peek at a title that was yet to be announced, the next installment in the NBA Street series. Featuring the working title of NBA Street Hometown, something you can still see in the early teaser found in the Xbox 360 version of NBA Live 07, we were impressed by what we saw and hyped for the finished product. These days, NBA Street Homecourt is something of a divisive entry in the series. Some people really love it, others hate it, and a lot of people seem to think it was just okay, kind of mid. Although it had a lot of the same bones as the previous games, it also changed things up with a new style and approach that definitely wasn't for everyone. As the final name and working title both suggest, NBA Street Homecourt is all about the hometown blacktops of NBA players, the courts where they became local legends before household names, if you will. Famous parks weren't new to NBA Street, but with the jump to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, the developers were eager to recreate these real-life courts as accurately as possible, as well as focus on their history and connection to NBA stars. This gave NBA Street Homecourt a grittier, more serious tone than its predecessors, a choice that definitely contributes to its mixed reception from fans of the series. It's not as vibrantly colourful as earlier games. Different courts have their own hue, dominating the aesthetic. The film strip and projector effects strive for an underground, independent film vibe. There's no excitable announcers or hype man. Though still stylized, the art design is less cartoony. The gameplay still involves over-the-top action, but there's also something more grounded about it, thanks in no small part to the gritty atmosphere. The vignettes for all the different parks definitely set the tone here, flickering nostalgic shots as the narration waxes poetic about the venue, weathered blacktops that echo with the memories of future NBA players, taking their first hopeful steps towards stardom, frayed nets that represent a community's resilience, the same resilience that can mould a basketball great, chain-link fences symbolising the shared dreams of a hoop-crazed neighbourhood, where the men are ballers, the women are ballers, and the children are also ballers. Okay, enough of the snark. While I appreciate the style and see merit in the direction, it's not to everyone's taste. I don't think it was a bad idea to try something new, and it was definitely aiming to capture the essence of streetball culture. For gamers though, I think NBA Street Homecourt might have been taking itself too seriously. If nothing else, the colour palette does create a distinct atmosphere that differs from earlier games. Again, it's a grittier, less cartoony aesthetic. That doesn't automatically make it bad, of course. Also, while lighting and colour palette was a divisive choice, the art team did a fantastic job of recreating those famous parks and gyms. The ability to select whether a team will play in shirts or skins might not seem like a big deal, but it's another detail that represents a part of streetball and pick-up hoops culture. It's clear they were trying to revamp the series for a new generation of consoles, and if nothing else, the players' faces look great for their era. It might have been everyone's preferred vibe and aesthetic, but it does succeed at its vision. Some of the changes might have gone down better if Homecourt hadn't lost a couple of established staples of the NBA Street series. Much like NBA Live 06 and 07 on Xbox 360, there were no legends in the game. Stretch and other original characters were also nowhere to be found, though he and a handful of familiar faces did return on 360 via paid DLC. It's always going to be a controversial move when a new direction isn't balanced out by some familiar content. A series shouldn't stagnate, but it does risk alienating the fanbase if it loses popular staples. Of course, the on-court experience is the most important aspect. Once again though, NBA Street Homecourt has a mixed reputation here. In many ways, the gameplay is familiar: streetball rules, ones and twos, an emphasis on tricks with the ball, high-flying dunks, and the game-breaker power-up that scores extra points while shaving them off your opponent's total. It's true the established style, which was the right decision, but it did invite criticism that it was more of the same. However, there were also some noteworthy changes in NBA Street Homecourt. Instead of 4 turbo controls that acted as modifiers with different combinations used to perform specific moves, now there were only 2, the front shoulder buttons. This was balanced out by having 2 trick buttons, one for pickup tricks and tricks on your defender, such as bouncing the ball off their head, and a regular crossover and dribble move trick button. The speed at which you press the trick buttons, combinations with the modifiers, and movement on the left stick will perform different tricks. As for dunks, different slams are performed by holding one of both modifiers and then releasing the shoot button earlier or later as a meter fills. Hold on too long of course, and you'll blow the dunk, though sometimes still in spectacular fashion. This too was a departure from previous controls, which, like dribbling tricks, involve different combinations of the modifiers while going up for a jam. The modifiers can also be used to form kick and knee passes, and passes and lobs off the board. It may come across as too simple to many NBA Street veterans, but I do think it was intuitive. Not everything has changed, of course. As usual, performing enough successful moves and then scoring will fill a meter and earn a game breaker. To use it in home court, back up to center court, hit the pick up trick button, and after the cutscene, you can dig into your bag of tricks with some really spectacular stuff. As I said, game breakers will also earn extra points on your buckets, but can still be stolen if you're not careful. It remains a balanced and exciting power-up, as essential to NBA Street as being on fire in NBA Jam. Incidentally, it would be remiss of me not to mention that the music that plays while Game Breaker is active is Herbie Hancock's 1983 hit single Rocket. It certainly added some throwback flair. Although the concepts are similar, the revamped controls do give the game a different feel to its predecessors. I still find the gameplay generally enjoyable, but I agree with gamers who rate the 6th Gen originals better, and understand why others don't like Home Court at all. A change in tone of feel was undoubtedly a risky move, and it didn't pay off for everyone. It also doesn't help that NBA Street Homecourt, much like NBA Live 06 and 07 for Xbox 360, runs at 30 frames per second. To its credit, the 360 version is one of the very few games on the platform that offers a native resolution of 1080p rather than simply being upscaled from 720p, but the lower frame rate obviously detracts from its visual brilliance. With that being said, there are some notable additions and innovations in NBA Street Homecourt. They weren't hit with everyone, but the double dunks, performed by successfully filling the dunk meter and releasing the button at the last second, are both flashy and an effective way of racking up points quicker. Launching off the back of a crouching teammate for a super dunk is satisfying to pull off. Up on the D-pad calls for a teammate to leap for a lob, while pressing down gets them set up for a launch. Even with the lower frame rate, dunks and ball handling tricks are flashy and exciting. Combine these moves with a game breaker, and you can really dazzle out there on the court. There was also new dribbling tech, which provided two key benefits. First of all, by rapidly pressing the remix trick button, your player will dribble lower and faster. Mixing up the speed of your button presses and combining it with holding the button will perform the most elaborate tricks. Second, the tech allows animations to be broken out of and chained together seamlessly, facilitating responsive controls and creative combos. This tech was actually borrowed by the NBA Live series, leading to the introduction of quick strike ball handling in NBA Live 08. It's one of the more underrated improvements in basketball gaming. No doubt it flies under the radar because NBA Street Homecourt and NBA Live 08 aren't considered to be among the best basketball games of all time. It's responsive and intuitive though, and the ability to break out animations and string them together is better than we've seen in some newer games. It's about the overall feel though, the whole package. For a lot of gamers, it didn't make enough of a difference. Gameplay is generally well balanced, and you can make satisfying plays at both ends of the court. The CPU can be cheesy at times, and is able to hold onto the ball a little easier, but for the most part, it provides a good and fair challenge. Jump shot timing is slightly unusual, as good releases feel a bit early, but it's not impossible to master. Timing is also essential on both sides of the ball in one-on-one scenarios, though there are visual prompts to help you steal the ball or elude the defender. They can also be disabled if you prefer. All in all, I would deem the gameplay in NBA Street Homecourt to be solid. It provides a familiar virtual streetball experience, from roughing up the ball handler for the steal, to taking advantage of no goaltending to swat everything, to showing off and breaking ankles, to rocking the rim with over-the-top dunks. The action is still fast-paced and exciting, though players are a little slower than in previous games, and really should have been quicker. It has some promising tech and fresh ideas, some of which admittedly work better than others. It's easy to pick up and play for newcomers, and veterans of the series will certainly master the familiar controls. Of course, familiarity has its drawbacks, especially when combined with changes that aren't necessarily desirable. Compare that to EA Sports' reboot of NBA Jam in 2010. It had been 7 years after the last NBA Jam title, and even longer since the last really good entry in the series. In some ways, it was a faithful reboot to a fault, but there was nostalgia there. Conversely, NBA Street Homecourt came out just a couple of years after NBA Street V3. NBA Street Volume 2, widely considered the gold standard in the series, and one of the best basketball video games of all time, only came out a couple of years before that, which invited unflattering comparisons, especially with a jump to a new generation of consoles. It was a tough act to follow, especially with the change in tone, and the lack of NBA legends and established NBA Street characters. So the gameplay in NBA Street Homecourt wasn't a hit with everyone, but also good enough that it wasn't universally reviled. What about its modes? The main campaign mode in NBA Street Homecourt is the Homecourt Challenge. As the name implies, it's about putting your homecourt on the map, while travelling across the US to parks and gyms to take on squads of NBA players. There's some flexibility in the order in which you choose to play games in each venue, but also need to clear certain challenges in order to unlock the next one. There's variety in the games, from the win condition and target score, to game rules, to scoring restrictions such as dunks or shots only. Invites to travel to the next location will pop up before you've cleared all of these games, so you need to make sure your business is done, as you won't be returning. Playing through the Homecourt Challenge requires us to create a baller, whose skills will level up along the way as we earn respect points, aka RP. The creation options are sufficient, but the choice is underwhelming. Faces are sculpted by choosing one of the fictional ballers, 2 NBA players, and then blending their features. A creative concept, but it can be tough to get the results you want. A player's style and beginning ratings are determined by their position and the fictional ballers that serve as templates, with comparisons to real players. It's intended for balance, and it's refreshing compared to the build systems in recent NBA 2Ks with all of their min-maxing, but it can be hard to find a good match. On the plus side, players level up quickly, and you'll have an opportunity to nominate a skill to boost all the way to 100 fairly early on. While the journey begins with low ratings and fictional teammates, it's not a painful slog to become a legendary baller, unlock gear in venues, and recruit real players after defeating them. At the end, both you and your home court, which you're able to name, will be famous. The recruiting and squad management system encourages you to choose carefully, and also requires managing egos. You'll only ever have 3 players, your creative baller and whoever you've recruited, so you'll be playing with the same trio until you make a change. As such, while you don't have to have the same teammates throughout the campaign, you won't have a permanent group of reserves that you can choose from at any time. Also, the players that you recruit don't just act like robots that you can control. If a player feels like they aren't getting enough shots and touches, and are generally being iced out, they'll express their displeasure. You'll have the opportunity to put it right, but if they still feel ignored out there on the court, they'll up and quit your squad, and you'll need to replace them. I'm not sure everyone will agree, but I like the idea. Besides, you can always dump them first if you feel they're being egotistical and are expendable. Other game modes include the Game Breaker Battle, in which points that count towards the win target can only be scored when you have a Game Breaker active. Trick Battle, a quick mode where points are scored by filling the Game Breaker meter. Back to Basics, a straightforward streetball game with 1s and 2s and no trick points or game breakers. Custom Game, where you can change the shot clock, point system and Game Breaker meter speed. And Practice, where you, well, practice. Online play was also available while the game service was still active, and there's local multiplayer. It's a solid assortment of modes. Throw in some unlockables including bonus all-star teams and gear, and there's ample replay value, if you enjoy the on-court experience of course. Notably, NBA Street Homecourt was the first game to include WNBA players, specifically Lauren Jackson, Cheryl Swoops, Diana Taurasi, Lisa Leslie, Sue Bird, and Tamika Catchings. Recent NBA 2K titles have obviously featured the WNBA far more prominently than a mere bonus team, but it was a start, and another fun example of an idea being older than a lot of people think or remember. As previously mentioned, a team of NBA Street Legends was also made available as DLC, exclusive to Xbox 360. Led by the face of the series Stretch, the team also included Drake, Biggie Littles, Takashi, Osmosis, and Bonafide. Perkins Park and additional Jordan Brand gear were also available as paid DLC, while Mello's Cloverdale Court was made freely available. It's interesting looking back at that DLC now. In hindsight, it probably should have been part of the game by default, just more unlockables to earn. Considering the greed of AAA gaming nowadays, it's fair to say that we lost the war on DLC in its ilk, and the hobby is worse off for it. At the same time, it's kind of quaint to look back at DLC that was actually appealing content, and more along the lines of a traditional expansion pack, the kind that predated digital distribution. It's also oddly nostalgic to me, being one of the first DLC purchases after picking up an Xbox 360. Aside from region-exclusive browser-based releases, NBA Street Homecourt marks the end of the NBA Street series to date. It's not exactly ending things on the highest possible note, but I don't think it necessarily doomed the series either. Like a lot of games, including other Street titles from EA Sports Big, it sadly fell victim to some common pitfalls of AAA gaming. Changing trends and demographics, a focus on properties that are big moneymakers over artistic and niche projects, electronic arts management, you know, the usual. I'm not a big fan of the claim that such and such is a good game, it's just not a good, whatever the series in question is, game. It always comes across as elitist fans zealously trying to gatekeep what a series is and should be, declaring any deviation from that blueprint to be an affront to the brand. I'm sure we can think of many examples of that. To that end, NBA Street Homecourt isn't the best game in the series, but I think it's a little better than it's given credit for. It isn't difficult or expensive to collect nowadays, so it may be worth a second look if you find a copy or dig yours out of storage. It fell short of some tough acts to follow, but some creative ideas, innovative tech, solid gameplay, and a decent array of modes do make it a respectable effort. It's not for everyone, but it's far from a disaster. In some ways, it reminds me of those old street balls that say things like, "If only I had a jump shot, no one would be talking about MJ or Dr. J." It's a bold claim, and it raises the question as to why they didn't work on their game a little more, but they're still legends in their own right. Interesting figures in basketball history beyond the NBA. Likewise, NBA Street Homecourt didn't have everything it needed to be as successful as it might have been, but it doesn't mean that there isn't anything to celebrate or appreciate. It's understandably polarizing, and it's nowhere near the top of my personal favourites, but I've always enjoyed it for what it is. If nothing else, I don't believe that it damaged the brand so badly that there's no interest in a return. If EA ever does bring the series back, it would be wise to follow the example of the original games, particularly Volume 2. However, there are some ideas that they could borrow from Homecourt as well. Bring back the best of the entire series, and you'll have a game that'll definitely stake its claim and put itself on the map.